All right, Oliver, welcome to episode 11. We're going to build our astronaut shuttle, the shuttle to bring our astronauts from the lunar space station, orbital station, down to the lunar ground station, ground base. And we're going to make it a automated. We're going to make it an automated shuttle. We're going to have a drone probe core controlling it. We're just going to put a 4-person habitat module on top with a fuel tank and a few engines. Realistically, I don't think NASA or anybody smart would put 4 non-gimbaling engines in a configuration like this, because if one of them went out, you wouldn't be able to really go anywhere. You'd be just spinning in circles. But whatever, this is KSP. We can light rockets infinitely every 2 seconds without effort, like starting a car engine, even though it's ridiculously difficult and complicated to get a real rocket engine running properly. But I digress. I'm getting way ahead of myself and off on a severe tangent. So I just added in some monopropellant tanks, and I'm going to put in the RCS thrusters. I'm going to use the center of gravity button down at the bottom to kind of line those RCS thrusters up with the center of gravity of the ship so that they work more efficiently in space. And of course, you got to have landing gear. Make sure the ladder is in place so you can get up and down. And now we got to test it. Make sure our Kerbal astronaut can get all the way down and all the way back up and get back in the ship. We don't want to build something, fly it all the way out there, and find out that our astronauts can't get on board the ship. So now that that's complete, we're going to go ahead and start assembling the rest of the rocket to get it up into Kerbal orbit and ultimately out to the lunar orbital space station. And I decided to use a fairing here just because it's a little bit more aerodynamic. I guess it might just be habit as well. And like always, the second stage that we're building now, we're going to put a drone probe core on there, and that way when we detach it, we can deorbit it. And like always, keeping space junk out of our way. And it looks like we got about 2,800 meters a second, really more like 3,000 meters a second of fuel there. So we're going to upgrade that second tank, and now we're a little bit over budget, but whatever. So off we go. And that second stage is now deorbited. So now we're going to wing it this time. We're not going to use a maneuver node anymore. Once you get to where you've gone to the moon a good amount of times, you just can wing it. So you're going to basically fly to the location where you put the maneuver node, and you're going to orient yourself prograde and just start burning. And you'll see here that as the apoapsis raises, that it will get you a moon encounter if you're roughly 90 degrees. It can be plus or minus 10 degrees. And so we want to approach the moon a little bit on the outside of the orbital altitude of the space station. And as you can see here, we're off on our inclination, so we're just going to face down and correct that so that we're on the same orbital plane as the station. And we're going to circularize at a higher orbital altitude than the space station. There's lots of ways to do this. We could have actually come in at the same orbital altitude, Let's just go with this method for now. We've got two circles. The teal circle is the orbital trajectory we have, and we're going to lower that. And then we can just move the maneuver node around until the two orange arrows or the two magenta arrows line up. So that tells us that in that location we're going to have to burn retrograde for 28 meters a second of velocity change to create that intersect point. Now I'm using the RCS thrusters just to tweak it a little bit. It doesn't take much. And we've got a difference in speed of 38 or 37 meters a second, which we're going to nullify by burning retrograde. I always like to turn around immediately so that we can decelerate ourselves and not crash into the object we're trying to dock with. Once we get close. Anytime you're conducting orbital maneuvers relative to another spacecraft, it's good to, in the beginning at least, always nullify your relative speed to each other before you do your next maneuver. It makes it a lot easier, and you don't get ahead of yourself and start to panic. When you panic, you tend to make bigger mistakes than when you're calm, cool, and collected. We're just going to thrust forward with our RCS thrusters, get somewhere between a half meter a second and a meter a second. And we're going to use our I, J, K, L keys, like always, to line up our yellow prograde marker with the center of the magenta bullseye, which is our target. So once you have a few meters a second towards your target and everything's lined up there, you can just kind of coast in and it'll pretty much self-dock. Now we need to refuel our shuttlecraft because we need enough fuel to get down to the lunar surface, to deorbit, to get down to the lunar surface and land, and then launch and get back up into orbit, and then conduct orbital maneuvers to rendezvous again with the space station. And so I'm going to speed up time here so we can get the ground station into the sunlight so that when we're landing we're not blind. And since we're using a drone probe core to fly this, we don't have an actual astronaut or a command pod. We're going to make sure that we have a communications relay, because in the game Kerbal space program, the idea of using a drone probe core, it is controlled by someone down there on planet Kerbal, so you need to have communications. Otherwise, you can't control the ship. So as we come to the lee side of the moon here, as we deorbit, you can see that the space station, you can see that our line of sight with planet Kerbal gets ruined, but the transmission goes from our craft to the space station and ultimately back up to planet Kerbal. So now we've got a lot of velocity here. We're coming in almost at orbital speed. Once we get close, we're going to hit our thrusters to maximum and slow us down. We're still going to aim a little bit long initially. And now we're going to do some housekeeping maneuvers to get us a little bit closer to our target landing area, which is going to be within I don't know, 50, 100 meters from our ground base. We don't want to be running along the lunar surface for 15 minutes with our little Kerbal astronaut to get where he wants to go. And once we come about straight up on top, we're going to go ahead and kill our speed, kind of like when we're docking with an orbital space station. You can see we've got a lot of altitude here, about 8.5 kilometers, so we have room to kind of adjust our trajectory a little bit. we get closer to our target. Once we get down closer, we can see that we're still a good bit away. So we kill our speed there, and then we kind of thrust in the direction we want to move so that we can get closer. And then we'll click back on our retrograde marker, which will keep us oriented retrograde to our, it's basically the opposite direction of our travel. And look, we got plenty of fuel. So we're going to hold our, oh, looks like I'm going to accelerate up a little bit to give us a little bit of time so I can reorient and get a little bit closer. And now we're going to keep the throttle in just such a spot that we can kind of keep our descent rate the same without accelerating too much, and then that allows us to come in for a nice soft landing, adjusting our throttle. And then I just wanted to show you here that you can decouple the symmetry of the landing gear, and you can adjust the spring strength and the damper strength so that you can level out the spacecraft in its final resting position at landing, so that it's more level with the lunar surface, so it's not at an angle, and you don't want all the marbles that you have rolling around on the inside of the spacecraft to be hitting anything, right? And there we go. Continued in episode 12.